Well, welcome everybody to the Local Systems Spring Meeting on Regional Construction and Contract Admin for the Western Region. This is our first and hopefully only virtual spring meeting series. We've worked hard to make this as interactive as we possibly could, so you should have the opportunity to ask questions, and when I'm done, Nicole will give you some more instructions on how to do just that. We held the general overview and project development meeting on February 25th with a great turnout for attendance. We've held the regional construction and contract admin meetings in the first two regions, or the other two regions, over the last several days, and today is our last regional construction meeting. The content of all three of these regional meetings for construction and contract admin have been the same. The presenters are using the exact same slides, so you should get relatively the same information. The agenda for today is, this is the welcome. When I'm finished, Nicole will talk briefly about how to make teams work. Then we'll start into the construction and contract administration section. And our newest employee, Zach Gonzalez, will be giving that presentation. And we'll be talking about, or he'll be talking about, some of the things that went well last year, some of the things that didn't go quite so well, some of the things that we observed, and then giving you a heads up on some of the stuff that'll be coming up in the next year, some changes that have been made. Then we'll have a short break. Then Nicole will come back up and talk about materials inspection. And we've had a lot of questions over how things work between SWAP and federal aid and the differences and that type of thing. So she'll be going over that in some great detail to help everybody hopefully get on the same page and know what to expect. Then Nikki Stinn, our secondary roads engineer, will be up and talking about Doc Express and Appia, what has changed, what our future looks like for both of those software programs. And we'll be there also to answer some questions. Then we'll have another short break. And then Sarah Okerlund, our urban engineer, will be up and give a presentation on inactive obligations and project end dates. This is no frill type of presentation, but it is extremely important that we get this on our forefront and know how important it is. Then to end our meeting, Clayton Burke from our Construction Materials Bureau will give a presentation on work zone safety. We think this is the best way to end and to kick off the next construction season. We want to keep everybody safe out there. So with that, we wish we could give you all donuts, but we can't. But that'll give you something to look forward to next year. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and hopefully absorb everything that we're presenting. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Donna. So we're going to try and have a little bit of fun and make this interactive with you guys so that you don't get as bored with a virtual meeting. You guys are consistent with all of the rest of the regions, plus the general overview meeting. Everyone's favorite phrase seems to be, or the majority's favorite phrase seems to be, "You're on mute." So we've said that like at least 4 times in all of our teams meetings, I feel like, for local systems. So these first couple of questions are just to get you used to using this polling software. They're just for fun. And then the next couple that I will ask, we really do want legitimate answers to those. And then during Zach's presentation, he'll be asking more polling questions as well. Just some quiz questions about construction and contract administration, and then we'll go over the answers. All right, so I'll move to the next one. All right, how do you feel about winter in Iowa? You guys are different than the other regions. The other regions seem to love winter. I was a little disappointed with that. Oh, now that one's picking up steam here. We'll give it a second. All right, I think it's evened out here. Looks like quite a few people could do without winter. All right, we'll move to the next one. So we want to know what type of agency or company you are with. A county, a city, DOT, a consulting firm, or other. You can use your phone, go to your camera app, and then hover over that little QR code. And when you do that, it'll have a little notification that comes up, and that opens up your Safari on an iPhone, or I don't know what the web browser is on an Android, but it opens a web browser. All right, it looks like the majority are from counties, and there's some cities, some DOT, and some consulting firms on. So that's great to see all that diversity on here. Okay, and then which of the regions do you primarily work in? This is the meeting for the Western region, but as we stated in the emails, anyone is welcome to attend any region meeting. The content will be the same. It's just that, you know, if you weren't able to attend the region that you work primarily in because of scheduling conflicts, we certainly welcome you on here. So looks like the majority of you are from the Western region, but we do have some from other regions and some probably consultants that represent more than one region. So that's good to see. Okay, that is the end of our little presentation on the welcome here. We'll turn it over to Zach Gonzalez. He's our Western Region Field Engineer, and he is going to give the presentation on construction and contract administration.
Thanks, Nicole. Can everybody see me and hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here this morning. I hope this is the only spring meeting that we have to do it this way. We love the donuts and in person, of course, but this is hopefully the last one that we have to do. I do want to point out that, and especially for you, Kent, yesterday, you with the Eastern region, you mentioned Hawkeye, and as you can see, I wanted to stay neutral, so none of my clothes have any Iowa State stuff on it. So didn't want to pick sides or anything. DOT, you know, staying neutral and all that. So no picking sides here today. But I do want to say that he made me put on a nice shirt. He looked so good yesterday that I wanted to put on a nice shirt. And of course, with COVID, all your nice shirts are all wrinkled in the closet, not wearing them. So I got out the iron, and halfway through, it's like, why am I ironing the back? So it doesn't make. All right, I heard Nicole laugh, so maybe one person laughed on that. That's the other beauty of virtual meetings, that I can just assume that everybody laughed at that terrible joke.
Exactly.
So, all right, so I'm going to share my screen here. And then I'm going to try to take my video off to help with bandwidth. As Nicole said, this is the construction and contract administration presentation. The field staff, starting with the central region. Here are your central region field staff, local systems people: Brian Cadis, field engineer; Daryl Erickson, field technician; and Brenda
Zach,
Bell.
it's not advancing for us. We still see your intro slide. Okay, now we've got Brian, Daryl, and Brenda up.
So I'm going to the next slide now. It changed on my end. And the Eastern region staff, we have in the Eastern region, Kent Ellis, and then Doug here as a field technician. And then this guy in the middle, we just call Tom. As you can see, he's a quiet introvert that but in his free time likes to terrorize innocent people on beaches with a uniform like this, looking like Elvis in a Hawkeye getup. And when he's not doing that, he looks like this. Has everybody seen the slide switch to see the real Tom? All right, moving over to the Western region, we have myself, and then the field technician that we have is Jeff Shelton, and we had interviews this week to replace Jeff. I know you're on, and in your words, I need to correct myself. Julia was irreplaceable, and we're just looking for a successor to Julia's position. She'll be missed, but we wish her the best.
That's correct.
All right. Moving on to working days. as long as the slides are switching okay, working days and liquidated damages. Contract time is an important part of all construction contracts. Highway and bridge construction projects usually impact roadway users, causing delays and out-of-distance travel. A contractor bids a project to complete work within the allowed contract period. Contract time can be established utilizing various methods or a combination of methods. Working days, calendar days, closure days, and completion dates. The working days are the most common method of contract time, and that's in Standard Spec 110802 and IM 6.000 Attachment D, Section 231 covers this in more detail. It is important that working days are administered consistently statewide because it impacts the bidding practices, impacts inspection time and costs, the roadway users, and it lessens disagreements with contractors. So we're going to go through a refresher on administering working days. Charging of working days is based upon a controlling item or operation of work. The controlling item of work is work that is or could be in progress at any given period of time and would have the greatest influence on the duration of the contract. At any given time, any task which has the greatest impact on completing the project on time will be considered the controlling item of work. I like to look at it like the bottleneck. What is the bottleneck on trying to get the work done? Work must be able to be performed on the controlling item of work before a working day or a partial working day can be charged. And here's how to charge working days as a refresher. 1 working day for work that can be performed on a controlling item of work for at least 3/4 of the day. Half a working day for work that is between a half and a 3/4 of a day, and not charging a working day if work cannot be performed on the controlling item for at least half the day. All right, quiz time. As Nicole promised, here's some quizzes to keep you awake from my monotone presentation here. So a grading and paving project contract is just starting up. Which of the following would likely be the controlling item of work? And as I pause here for it to populate, are there any questions so far in the chat box, or does anybody have anything on what we've covered so far? All right, looks like it's leveling out some. 85% of you say clearing and grubbing, and that is right, clearing and grubbing. Clearing and grubbing must occur before grading can proceed. Grading must occur before pavement can proceed. Paving must occur before pavement markings can proceed. So the controlling item of work changes as the next phase of work, which has the most control over the duration of the project, changes. All right, another quiz. On a grading and paving project, the engineer has determined that excavation class 10 roadway and borrow is the controlling item of work. It rained the night before. The contractor is not grading today due to wet conditions, but their pipe crew was able to install roadway pipes for most of the day. Should a working day be charged? Feel free to grab a virtual donut, everybody. Okay, I think we're flattening out. It's normalizing. About 3/4 say no, and about 1/4 or better say yes. The answer is no. So good job, everybody. Even though a part of the contractor's crew was able to be productive the majority of the day, work has to occur on the controlling item of work in order to charge a working day. Who determines the controlling item of work? The engineer. A contractor may dispute the engineer's decision, but it is still the engineer's decision, not the contractor. Okay, another quiz. A contractor disagrees with a working day that was charged. How long do they have to dispute the time charged? Okay, well above 90% for 10 calendar days. 1 week is getting 6% on my screen, and for all eternity is down to 3%. I'd be voting that one too, not gonna lie, just to have fun. All right, 90%, it's normalized here. We're going to move on. The answer, 10 calendar days. Good job. The calendar day count begins being counted when the contractor receives the working day report. That's uploaded in Doc Express. The requirement is noted in the standard spec 110802, section H. This requirement needs to be clearly communicated during the pre-con meeting. You should not entertain time disputes submitted at the end of the project. This is important, everybody, because we have seen at the regional level, it's not quite widespread, but enough to mention that timely submissions aren't always done with the working day reports, and then that does leave the door open for problems at the end of the project, and we have seen that here and there throughout the region. So that helps keep those disputes minimized at the end of the project. The engineer has a responsibility to assure that the working day reports are uploaded in a timely manner. Oh, that just led right into this perfectly. The engineer should not wait until the end of the project to submit weekly reports. The contractor needs current information when time is being charged. Time charges can impact their schedule on a project. Keeping information current presents arguments later. So the engineer's responsibility is timely submission of the working day reports. The contractor's responsibility is reading those, or else they forfeit their chance of contesting that at the end of the project if things go south and there's liquidated damages. Quiz time. When do you stop charging working days? All right, I'm seeing 2/3 or better on when the roadway is open to traffic, about 20% when all contract work is complete. Never. There's some greedy people out there. About 8%, 7% of you. When the cows come home, that's there's that 3% sense of humor people out there. Okay, I'm seeing it starting to flatten out. About 2/3 when the roadway's open to traffic. 1/4 of you say when all work is complete, and about 6% on cows. 6% like cows, and 6% say never. Answer, little trick question here. Could be either 3 or 4. When all the work is complete, or when the roadway is open to traffic. The answer depends upon a project's circumstances. You know, a weir that is off even the roadway and no work is being on the roadway might be treated a lot differently than a mainline paving project, of course. But the answer should typically be when all the work is complete. Standard specification 110809 allows for working days to be suspended when the roadway is open to traffic as long as the contractor is already incurring liquidated damages, the roadway is fully open for use, shoulder to shoulder with no temporary lane closures, flaggers, or other traffic impacts. The remaining work to be complete is minor in nature, such as erosion control, and can be completed without impacting traffic, and the remaining work to be completed without excessive delay by the contractor. All of these conditions need to be met before working days can be suspended. I've been guilty of not doing this in the past myself, so this is a good refresher for everybody. The time suspension should not be applied when there are several and or larger items of work to complete. This specification is typically applied for punch list work, although the contractor is supposed to be out of working days for the specification to apply. It is up to the engineer's discretion whether the specification is applied or not. It is not the contractor's choice or right. They sign that right away when they bid the project. That's in the specifications. Local Systems IM 6, Attachment D, 231, Special Considerations for Adjusting Liquidated Damages is where you can find more details on this. And further guidance that 30 calendar days is typically adequate to complete remaining work. LDs. When a contractor exceeds the allowed number of working days or does not finish work by the completion date, liquidated damages are to be assessed. For completion date projects, calendar days will be tracked every calendar day past the completion date using the weekly report of working days. That's Form 830-238. Liquidated damages are not a penalty, but a predetermined and agreed amount noted in the contract. They bid knowing that that is the amount. And so that's why it's to be assessed appropriately. It is important that the assessment of liquidated damages is conducted consistently statewide. Liquidated damages are a term of the contract and need to be treated as such. LD should not be waived without just and documentable cause. FHWA has provided the Iowa DOT with guidance on how to document any waivers to liquidated damages. The Iowa DOT is committed to following this guidance on federal aid, SWAP, and FM projects to help maintain statewide consistency. It eliminates everyone, of course, it eliminates the, well, so-and-so county or so-and-so city allowed me to do this or that, and that's what we're getting at here. All changes to the contract time must be documented by a change order. If liquidated damages are being waived based upon the standard spec 11809, the reason for the waiver must be documented by a change order. If LDs will be eliminated by adding more working days, the change order needs to provide justification for those added days. If LDs are being waived because the contracting authority does not believe they were damaged, this must be documented by a change order that demonstrates why there was no damage and supported by the engineer's analysis of the time and cost impact. The Local Systems Bureau is here to help address liquidated damage questions. So if you have questions on this, the best person to reach out in the Western region is Field Technician Jeff Shelton. He reviews all draft change orders and including ones with liquidated damages. He'd be your first point of contact in the Western region, and I'm sure the field technicians in the other two regions are the appropriate persons to contact for the same. Fieldwork acceptance in Form 435, Federal Aid, SWAP, and Farm to Market TSF projects. Notify by email the local systems field engineer approximately 2 weeks prior to the contractor completing work to request a final field review. We know that's not always easy, guys. When you're in the heat of the moment, one of the last things you're thinking about doing wrapping up a project is notifying us by an email that, hey, we're getting close. We just have so many projects at a field level. Jeff, what do we have? 180 projects open thereabouts now in various stages?
186 this morning.
186. So we don't always know each one like you know them. So we do need your help in notifying us when there is, when you're about ready for final field review. Really helps us plan. With 180 out there, you can imagine we're going several different directions. And so that heads up is very much appreciated. The field review should be scheduled with the project engineer, contractor, local systems field engineer, and other applicable staff. After the field review, email the draft punch list to the field engineer. After the local systems field engineer's concurrence, provide the final punch list to the contractor. After the contractor completes the punch list, email the local systems field engineer with a summary of the corrections taken and include pictures of the final punch list items. All right, another quiz time. The 435 is used to document acceptance of the field work. When should the 435 be signed by the engineer? All right, I think it's stabilizing. I see about half. The lead is when local systems field engineer notifies the field work is accepted. And the answer, after the local systems field engineer notifies that the field work is accepted. Good job. After the LSFE receives the engineer's email showing the punch list is being complete, the local systems field engineer will respond noting that the field work is accepted and proceed with the 435. Signing the 435 prior to this will prematurely start the 50-day count for determining interest payment. For FM projects, the local systems field engineer is not involved in the field acceptance process. So in other words, we're only talking about federal aid, SWAP, not FM. Signing the 435. All signatures on the 435 should be done electronically using Doc Express. If they are wet signed and also signed electronically in Doc Express, it causes some confusion for determining the final acceptance date used for determining interest payment. So that's why we're looking for the electronically signed only. The FAD is the date that the project engineer signs the 435. For projects located on the FM system, the engineer needs to sign the 435 in Doc Express twice, once as project engineer and once as the person responsible charge. The PIRC signature represents the Board of Supervisors acceptance. Moving on to contract quantity, plan quantity items. Standard specification 110901 allows for items to be paid by plan quantity without final field measurements. This can be accomplished by specifications, method of measurement, plans, estimate reference notes, contract quantity agreement, Form 830-230. The plan quantity items should be discussed at the pre-con. The inspector needs to know if measurements will be needed to support the quantities paid before the work begins. Typical spec language for method of measurement. Modified subbase will be the quantity shown in the contract documents. PCC pavement, square yards of the type specified shown in the contract documents. Measurement of the quantities of steel HP piles, either encased or not, will be the plan quantity. Plan notes outweigh spec language, so plan notes trump spec language. Contract quantity agreements outweigh spec language and plan notes. Contract quantity agreements are not needed for items already defined to be paid as plan quantity in the specifications or plans. The method of measurement for each contract item should be reviewed before starting a project. Review specifications and plan notes. Plan quantity items should not be changed unless there's an obvious error in the quantity, if there's a bust somewhere. Field conditions modify the plan work, like matching an existing pavement joint, or if there's added or deleted work. If plan quantity items need to change, it must be documented on a change order. Process change orders at the time the change occurs. Please do not wait until the end of the project or include in the entire contract balancing change order. And so if you want to know where this is located, plan quantity items on the local systems website, go to the index button right by the e-forms. And here we are. So the blue here is indicating plan quantity. Again, these do not need to be measured. We have some people that do measure those and then want to adjust at the end of the project. You don't have to. You can save yourself a lot of time, and there's not a lot of value to doing it anyway. We're talking about modified subbase, cubic yards, granular subbase, square yards. You know, these kind of things do not need to be measured down to the gnat's rear. It is by plan quantity. Whatever is in the quantities in the plans is to be paid. Quiz time. What does the inspector need to document on their quantity sheet for a plan quantity item? What does the inspector need to document on their quantity sheet for a plan quantity item? A lot of choices on this one. Calculated quantity of field work performed, 3%. Dates and locations of work, 20%. 3 and 5, almost 18%. And 4 and 5, about half of you are saying 4 and 5. And about 7% to 3 and 5. I think it's normalizing here, so we're going to move ahead. Answer, 4 and 5. Dates, locations of work, and estimated quantity of work performed. No measurements or calculations are needed since the intent is to pay plan quantity. If the field work changes from what the plan shows, only the areas added or deleted need to be measured. The dates the work was performed and the locations of the work performed need documented. Estimate or derive from plan tabs the daily work performed to process intermediate payments, but in the end, plan quantity will ultimately be what is paid. Okay, DOT process changes. Over the last couple of years, changes have occurred in the processing of contractor pay system vouchers, so 309s, your farm to market vouchers, signing change orders, and processing final paperwork. So another quiz here. How should contractor pay system, so like your farm to market vouchers, be submitted for payment? Mail to Finance Bureau, upload to Doc Express and DOT will process, upload to DocX and email to dot.localsystems upload to Doc Express, and email DOT-contractor pay. At some point in the past, a lot of these have been the way. It's changed a lot. Over 90% of you are picking C, 4% for upload to DocX and DOT contractor pay. We'll move on to the answer, and it is, yes, you're right, upload to Doc Express and email to DOT Local Systems, Iowa DOT US. As of September 22nd of last year, all intermediate and semifinal vouchers for contractor pay system projects are to be uploaded in Doc Express and submitted by email to this web address. The submittal of the voucher will be handled by the administering bureau. New blank vouchers and payment receipts are uploaded to Doc Express, estimates and vouchers drawer by Local Systems Bureau. Another quiz. The DOT Administering Bureau needs to sign change orders for which of the following projects? Federal aid, SWAP, FM, local projects let through the DOT, all the above, all but 4, all but 3 and 4. Which ones do the DOT Administering Bureau need to sign? About 3/4 of you are saying all but 4, and a few federal aid. A few say all the above. A few of you are saying all but 3 and 4. You're right. Answer all but 4. Local projects let through the DOT. The DOT needs to sign all change orders for federal aid, SWAP, and FM projects. For Doc Express projects, all signatures should be obtained electronically through Doc Express. Another quiz. The DOT Administering Bureau has to sign the 435 Statement of Completion for which of the following projects? Again, we have federal aid, SWAP, FM, local projects like through the DOT, all the above, all but 4, all but 3 and 4. Now we got neck and neck here between all and 4 and all but 3 and 4. And all but 3 and 4 is pulling ahead slightly. Give it one more second here. All right, seems to be flattening out with a slight edge, but all but 3 and 4. And that is the answer, all but 3 and 4. Farm to market and local projects let through the DOT. The DOT needs to perform final field reviews and sign the 435s for all federal aid and SWAP projects. For Doc Express projects, all signatures should be obtained electronically through Doc Express. Okay, now I got you on your edge of your seat with all that fun stuff. Now we're gonna, don't fall out of your chair, but we're gonna be talking about specification updates here. So it's, this is usually the time when I was a county engineer, I try not to let them glaze over and yawn too much, but these will be impacting local projects a lot. So we wanted to show these to you so that you're aware of them coming up on your future projects. Okay, we got some updates on 1102E5, placement of EO and AA notices and posters. 3 new posters will be required on the board. Info required for several years by the Department of Labor, but not by our contract. Standard spec 1102-19E5, placement of the board and posters. Employers may already be providing these to the employees, may already have seen them on the project boards, already available on the Civil Rights website. And there's the link to the specification change. This was changed will be in October of 2021. Construction manual updates for 2022 January publication. Construction season will include new posters and updated site inspection form. There's a picture of that guy. And then that one. And finally that one. New inspection form will be available on Forms Management website for the October 21 letting. And there's a link, and the form is 650-170. There you go, there's a picture of it. Moving on, structures. 2403-02B2A. Struck reference to mid-range water reducer. Specifies normal water reducer. Slump target range revised to 1 to 4 inches with a tolerance of 5 inches max. And another change on 02E, deletes reference to mid-range water reducer. And then 2513-03 A to B, remove minimum slump requirement for BR mix, previously a 1/2 inch. 251303F1, updated specification reference for finishing requirements. And then IM 445, precast concrete. Precast products can't be shipped until the products are a minimum 3 days old and attain 28-day strength. 241203C, placing concrete. Added word forecast to the following statement. Do not place concrete if forecast theoretical rate of evaporation for the day exceeds 0.2 pounds per square foot per hour. And added a requirement, calculate the theoretical evaporation rate in accordance with methods in IM, materials IM 382, at a maximum interval of every 3 hours during placement. If the rate exceeds 0.2 pounds per square foot per hour, cease placement at the next location acceptable to the engineer. And here's another spec change, replaced spec for mid-range water reducer with normal water reducer. Increased price adjustment for uncorrected dips identified during the profilogram testing of bridge decks and approaches, $1,600 each, up from $900. Concrete wind pump should be used for a target range air content of 7.5% plus or minus 2%. And here's some more spec changes, revised criteria for installation of steps for manholes and intakes. No steps for structures less than 20 feet deep. Steps required for greater than 20 feet deep. Handholes and junction boxes, added specification for HDPE handhole and cover. And a handhole added specification for HDPE handhole and cover on A, 418901A. Erosion control, standard road plan EC 204, perimeter and slope sediment control devices. I always call them SOCs. Effective this next letting, revised placement of wooden stakes. So the current one is up here, if you can see my mouse, and then the effective of this next letting, these are going to be required at these locations. So we have these, and I suspect it's because they were blowing out, and so want some more reinforcement for those stakes, and then we have a staple right here too. Placement and location of steel posts. For silt fence, posts are installed several inches downslope where the fabric is sliced in. So the old way was the silt fence right next to the post. The new way, it's going to be like this. There's going to be a little bit of a slack in that silt fence. Place silt fence continuously up to a maximum 200 feet in flare, and it's shown in this diagram here, these humps. Just to catch it so it doesn't run laterally along the silt fence on your slope and make cuts. Seeding. Reduced ryegrass rate if fescue rate is increased, effective for the 2021 construction season only, due to a shortage supply of ryegrass. So we still have the rates right here, but then the asterisk is here is new, and down here it talks about that. PCC pavement. Standard spec 230105K, pavement for cold weather protection, effective last October, increased the rate of pay from $1 to $2 per square yard. So I only had to do this once before I made that mistake once of not speccing that cold weather protection will not be paid for in my plans, and I had to pay to put a coat on, and now it's going to be twice as expensive for that coat. Items to be aware of: seat date extensions. Any DOT-approved extensions will be published in the Construction Materials Bureau website. Here's a link. General items of interest: concrete barrier railing issues. We've noticed projects identified multiple issues last year. These issues should be closely monitored for your bridge projects. So here's what we're talking about. First photo on the left, reinforcing cage is not high enough. The deck is not finished flat. The cage hook bar is touching the deck, so the concrete can't get around the bar to give it a good encasement. Photo 2, top to bottom. Uppermost horizontal bar not high enough. Spacing between bars is not as specified. Photo 3, the barrier rebar cage verticals are touching the deck, if you can see it way back here. Concrete can't get around to confine the bar. And photo 4, horizontal bars are too low and not in plan indicated location. Photo 5, the traffic side, the horizontal and vertical reinforcing is too deep. If you see, that's too much cover here on the front side. Should be 2 inches to 2.5 5/8 respectively without tolerance. And then here's one, the back side of the horizontal and vertical are too shallow. And there's the depth that's required for that. Here's a result of it being too shallow. I won't read all this, but as you can see, it's just spalled out and you can see the rust. It just, what it does is your barrier will not be as strong if it's not placed, if the reinforcing is not placed where it's supposed to be, number one, and number two, it has risk of being exposed early and starting rust, and it'll hurt the durability and not protect the reinforcing. And I'm not going to read all this, but it'll be included on the PowerPoint on our website, showing some examples of that. If you're wondering if it's, you got one, I will just leave you with this. You got one chance to do it right, and once it's covered and done, it's hard to correct. So if you see something, say something, and if it's a slip form, dry run it first. General items of interest. We got a few minutes left here. We're near the end. Line dragons can be an option for difficult bridge deck pours. Transparent stay-in-place bridge forms. I think Nicole was saying that this is catching on in a lot of other states, and Iowa, for some reason, is a little bit behind on this one, rather than being front on some things. It seems to be catching on in other places and just now being introduced in Iowa. Placement of 2 new bridges by lateral slides. 2 Iowa DOT bridges were successfully placed in 2020. So here's the line dragon. I'm not going to be reading all this, but the line dragon is maybe some of you have seen this, the red guy in the photo, that's a placer in the left photo. And then here we got 2 of them, the placer and then the polar is on the right here. So they're working in tandem. Here's the transparent stay-in-place forms. The advantages of this, I'll just read them briefly. The bridge spanning over a railroad, it might be advantageous to use over non-navigable water on tub girder bridges, on bridges requiring top-down construction, like if there's utilities or other obstructions down below. Successfully used in 2020 on some bridges. Okay. I bored you to death. That's it. I did have a text during the presentation. Where's my donut? Here you go. Here's your donut. Virtual donuts for everybody.
Thanks, Zach.
With that, I'll turn it back over to Nicole.
Does anyone have any questions for Zach or Jeff? Are there any questions so far about anything we've covered?
Can I ask about the punch list stuff?
Absolutely.
John Rasmussen, sorry, I don't see my name coming up.
I see you lit up, John. I knew it was you.
Could that just happen when our weekly working day reports are at 90%? Or do we actually need to notify? I mean, I feel like we're giving you the information. I just don't know if I want to make another notification, I guess. Trying to get out some more. Could you just come out and do that at 90%?
I think the problem with that, John, is I'm looking at about 40 working day reports a week, and a simple email letting us know that it's ready for us to come to look at would allow us to kind of coordinate trips, and so we weren't necessarily coming to your project just to look at your project.
Right, but for us to know if they're going to be done in 2 weeks is kind of hard too, because sometimes it progresses real fast and sometimes it drags on forever. I just don't. It'd be easy to hit it at 90%, and maybe that's what we'll do, I guess. But yeah, I just feel like we're doing that once already.
I think the intent is like if it's a structure project and you see them stripping forms or something, just shoot me an email or something, because everybody knows these guys they're gonna be getting out of town pretty quick. It just ideally we'd like to coordinate more than one job visit a day.
I'm gonna take that as a no.
That's correct, John.
Okay.
There's just a lot of Doc Express notifications for our field staff, and so they wouldn't catch all those.
Sure, we're all kind of drowning in the paperwork, but it all just, even though it goes into Doc Express, it still goes into paper and doesn't really serve any of us like it ought to. You know, that data there is not really available. You know, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not smart data.
No.
Yeah.
I think what everybody needs to realize is when you're putting something in Doc Express, that's your file, and that's not necessarily a notification for any of the field staff to do anything.
Yes, like Sarah typed in the chat pod here, the Western region currently has 176 active projects. So for them to be reviewing every single working day report as you guys put those in Doc Express, it's just not their top priority. They'd be, you know, they're more interested in getting to audits and, you know, getting out in the field. So just having that email, you know, that you're getting close, even if you don't know it's exactly 2 weeks, you know, we certainly understand that, but the more notice you can give, the better.
Right. It just, I mean, we're automating the process, but we're not automating the data to actually work for us. So it's, yeah, I guess that's maybe the frustration. Yeah. This stuff isn't really doing anything other than helping keep us organized. It doesn't really work for us.
It's, Nikki will get into this, but think of Doc Express like your, you know, file folder, your physical file folder, except it happens to be, you know, on a web-based program. Mm-hmm. Your file folder wouldn't, you know, speak to you and tell you that it's 90% done, just like Doc Express doesn't. You know, If the data was that smart, that'd be super handy, but unfortunately it's not. It's just a, you know, like a flat file, I think they call them, with being a PDF.
I agree, Nicole. It would be nice, and it is evolving, but it's not there yet, John. I've wished that before myself, but if Doc Express has done anything, I think it's saved us a whole lot of time on both sides with visits that couldn't be done during COVID. I don't know how this could have been done without Doc Express, trying to manage this many projects with locals without this platform.
Mary Beth has a fun video. For those of you seeing the videos here, those are 2 different bridges that we did lateral slides on over Old Man's Creek and Old Woman's Creek near Iowa City on Highway 1. These were the DOT's competitive highway bridge program projects. I am going to be talking about materials. So if you have materials questions, you're welcome to contact your district materials engineers or staff. And there's a website there listed at the bottom of the little map picture. And then the map shows, you know, which counties and then cities, of course, would fall into which district. So it's the same districts that you guys were used to. They just don't quite line up with the local systems regions. So as far as materials requirements for local public agencies, the project engineer shall follow all materials inspection requirements per DOT specifications, particularly materials IM 204 and all of its appendices. Swap projects fall under category 4 in materials IM 103. So that's something to also pay special attention to. And I'll get into more of this stuff in detail here in a little bit. The DOT will still provide the materials acceptance report, which you might also hear referred to as LIMS. That's what the program's called. I don't remember what that acronym stands for. Agencies can still request sampling and testing on these category 4 type projects like farm to market and federal aid swap. Certain things the DOT will do, and then certain things the DOT may do. So it's important to pay attention to that language. So in Materials IM 103, under the Quality Assurances Procedures in the IM, I want to emphasize that HMA and PCC plant calibrations, the DME may assist in witnessing the HMA and PCC plant calibrations when they bring in a portable plant. So may means they also may not. So it just kind of depends on if they have time. So they might decline this request if you had asked. So first you have to ask, and then second, they have to answer yes or no. And if they happen to decline a request, there is an IM that you and your staff can follow, as well as a checklist that you can use. And those are all listed below on the screen here. So all that you're doing is witnessing the plant calibration, okay? So the contractor is conducting the plant calibration. It's in their best interest for the plant to be properly calibrated. So if it isn't, you know, the mix isn't going to be right, something's ultimately going to affect the product, and then the additional testing once you get production going will show that something is amiss. So it's certainly in their best interest to calibrate the plant correctly. And that's why, you know, we're just not quite as worried about this as maybe some other items. So we'll get into an HMA paving example. All of this information comes from Materials IM 204, Appendix F, and there's a link to it. So pay special attention to where it says on the left side, so there's the dates, and then it says material or construction item, and then right below that it says source inspection. So that's basically at the source in which the item is coming from. So like an approved source for coarse aggregate, that would be the quarry. Approved brand for something like the release agent, that would be from the manufacturer. So you can look in the IM, see where it's circled there on the screen, and it says AS, that's approved source, and AB is approved brand. And then to the right of those, there's a blue number, and that's the IM in which you can refer to see if that source or brand is in fact approved by DOT materials. So then if it is, you know, then you're good to go essentially as far as the source goes. So then when it comes to plant inspection, having certified plant inspection on the project means that the contractor is doing all of the quality control testing. So that's the stuff at the left side of the screen. So where it says quality control towards the top, and then to the right of that, it says independent assurance and verification, S&T, sampling and testing. Those are the different columns to pay attention to. So as far as the project engineer goes, that would be you folks, the county engineers, city public works directors, city engineers, consultants acting as project engineer. It'll say RCE, and then you see the definitions down below. It says RCE, resident construction engineer / project engineer. So anytime this is RCE in here, no, that means you folks out in the field there. So the project engineer, like for asphalt binder, should sample the binder and aggregates once per day, and then test the first day plus 20%. The verification testing for asphalt binder is sampled by the project engineer, and then it can get tested at the DOT, okay? So you're sampling that, and then you're sending it off to the DOT, but you first have to ask them if you can do that. So you can do that the first day, and then 1 test per week maximum. And then the verification testing of stabilizing agent would be done at a rate of 1 sample per week maximum. You see all that on the screen there towards the right side. And then the grade inspection, so that's out on the actual roadway. The contractor needs to be doing the testing per 2303 of the specifications. And then the project engineer will take hotbox samples and cores daily. When requested, the DME will perform that verification testing of the uncompacted mixture on the first day, and then 1 test per week maximum after that. Verification testing of loose cold in place recycling will be done at a rate of 1 test per day maximum. And then as with anything, you're always welcome to go above and beyond the minimum. If there's issues or something, there's some reason to test more. The DOT, however, may not be able to test more. So an independent testing firm could be used in that situation. So the materials IM 103 does say that category 4 projects, FM and swap only, when requested, the DME will perform limited testing. So this includes HMA mix design, paper reviews, or if any of you are doing test strips, that would include that as well. And then HMA and PCC verification testing of smoothness, if you've opted in on smoothness, may be done at the rate in IM 204, which I think says 10%. So just some additional items to keep in mind. For the PCC paving example, this information comes from materials IM 204 Appendix E. And again, there's the website. So once again, we have this source inspection, and it talks about the approved source or the approved brand. So like curing compounds, you can see that those get tested in a lab, and then you can visit the IM that coordinates with that particular material to see if the brand that your contractor is planning on using shows up as an approved brand already. So for the source inspection, IM 103 says that for all projects, the DME, when requested, will perform the source inspection tasks in IM 204. So that's where you look for that source inspection in the, like in the previous slide here, where it says that. And then you can work with the DOT materials staff to make sure that that has already been approved. A lot of these sources are already being inspected by the DOT materials staff, like something like a coarse aggregate. You know, a lot of times they've already inspected that quarry. So you can just ask the materials staff for a copy of the DOT's test results. And if they don't have them, then they would need to do that source inspection. So for plant inspection, you can see again at the left side, that's QC. So that's the contractor, and that's from the batch plant or the ready mix plant. And then the right half is once again the independent assurance and verification. IA is that independent assurance. You'll see that abbreviated there. And then V is verification. So essentially the verification is the project engineer checking the contractor at a less frequent interval than what the contractor is checking themselves. And then IA, independent assurance, is the district materials engineer checking the project engineer. So that's not required for non-federal aid. You can see there's notes at the bottom there, and they're in gray because they were new. So that's how materials differentiates when there's been a new item added or a change made. They have it kind of with that gray highlight in the back. So the independent assurance is what I like to refer to as checking the checker's checker. So the contractor has already checked themselves, and then you are doing the verification testing. So you're checking the contractor, and then the district materials staff was checking you to make sure that you were doing the test right. That's the part that we're not doing on federal aid swap and farm to market jobs. We are still doing that on federal aid jobs if you still have any of those outstanding. So essentially, you know, it's in the project engineer's best interest, of course, to check the contractor on occasion to make sure that what you are buying is of good quality as the project owner. So then for grade inspection, the plastic concrete, the QC is the contractor. They're testing 1 per 350 cubic yards, or there's some different requirements if you're QMC. And then verification, the project engineer is testing out there on site. Independent assurance, once again, is not required on non-federal aid, and you'll see that in the notes at the bottom there. And then the hardened concrete, the thickness, that's important for the lifespan of the road. So you can test that. And same thing with smoothness if that is written into your project. So now we'll get into a bridge example. That's materials IM 204 Appendix H for structural concrete. So once again, the source inspection, we have that approved source and approved brand listed there. Again, the IMs that you can go to see which approved source or approved brands are listed. And then for plant inspection, we still have that left half being the quality control or QC, and the contractor is doing that at the ready mix plant. And then the right half is independent assurance and verification. Again, the project engineer is checking the contractor, and independent assurance, the district materials engineer is checking the project engineer for federal aid jobs, but again, not required on non-federal aid or those category 4 in materials IM 103. Once again, those notes at the bottom are pretty helpful. So I would suggest that you look those over when you have a project going. So for instance, an example here, fine aggregate gradation for a bridge deck. At the right within that table, it indicates that the RCE, project engineer, gets a sample and tests 1 gradation for the deck. The independent assurance is not required for a category 4 via the notes at the bottom. So essentially the LPA is checking the contractor, and then the DOT is not checking you to verify that you in fact did that test correctly. You have been certified, so we assume you're still doing the test correctly, that you still know how to do it. That's the part that, like I said, we're not doing on the non-federal aid projects. And then for grade inspection out there at the bridge site, for the plastic concrete, you'll see that the project engineer shall perform 1 air and 1 slump test per 30 cubic yards, but a minimum of 1 test per day is needed. It also shows an independent assurance by the DME, but then once again, we have that note, which says for local agency projects with no federal funding, independent assurance tests are not required. So again, you as the LPA or the LPA's representative as the project engineer, you're just checking the contractor, and the DOT is not checking you to verify that you did the test correctly like they would on a federal aid project. One other item that has come up under grade inspection is reinforcing steel. So that reinforcing steel has already come from an approved source. You've checked that over in your certifications that you should have received from the contractor. Once it gets to the project site, the verification over at the right side of this page says that the DME would take a 6-foot sample, but then at the bottom, it has that note. For local agency projects with no federal funding, verification samples or monitor samples sampled by the DME are not required. These samples may be sampled by the contracting authority. With prior approval, these samples may be tested by the Iowa DOT Central Lab. So essentially, you don't need to get that reinforcing steel sample. However, if you wanted to sample it, just to check up on the contractor or, keep them on their toes or whatever, you're welcome to ask the contractor to cut a 6-foot piece of steel, and you can take it to the DME. Make sure you read IM 451 first. The contractor can then cut that, and you can talk to the DME, and they can send it off to the central lab for testing with that prior approval. You could also deliver it to the central lab yourself. You've got some forms to fill out, first of all, but you could certainly do that if you were coming to Ames for any reason. So with that, does anyone have any questions? And our next speaker is Nikki Stinn. She's going to talk about Doc Express and Appia.
So we'll start with Doc Express updates. Reminders in general, a bunch of miscellaneous reminders here. There is a revised web page now. In our post-letting resources, we've divided that page into a lot of different subsections, so it's much easier for you to find the materials now. So that link is there for the new page. Another reminder, do not attach any additional documents to the contract or place anything extra in the contract drawer. Doing so will invalidate the contract, and then we have to start all over with the process. Oh, sorry, my reminder is going off at me. Okay. There is a 00 drawer in Doc Express that has copies of all of the kind of useful instructional information, user's guides, contract signing instructions, that type of thing. We'll see that a little later in the presentation. Reminder to upload documents in a timely fashion. We've had issues with this with a lot of people. I notice especially vouchers, when we go to help people with vouchers, that they don't have the copies uploaded to date, and then it's hard to help with the issue when we can't see most recent information. So please get those documents uploaded. And we do have a new addition of a drawer. It's the Diaries Drawer. That drawer is only visible to local system staff and the local public agency, not to the contractor. So it's there for anyone who wants to have an entire project file all in one place. And it helps with our auditing staff being able to see those diaries there too. So reminder, the naming convention must be followed. This is required for all local public agency contracts let through the DOT that utilize DOT specs. We have a lot of agencies not complying, so this is a plea and a reminder to please use that naming convention. What happens if you don't use it is that basically when we go to archive the file and retain that information out of the system, it's like you took every single piece of paper and documentation in your project file and threw it all in a big box without any labels or anything. And then when someone needs to find something, you say, well, dig through that whole box of unlabeled stuff and find it. So using that naming convention is really important for archiving and just for everyone to recognize exactly what documents you are uploading. Our staff, contractors, yourself, just everyone. So many of you may not know that if you want to customize that base convention, you can to some, or customize the file name, you can to some degree. You just need to use that base naming convention. So over on the left, you'll see in the green box there that showed up, voucher 001 would be the base convention, but then you can add whatever you want to after that to customize it. So if you want to add a parent number like is shown there, or some type of wording or whatever, you're able to. Just make sure you've used the base to start with, and then you can add whatever you want to at the end. So there's the spec quote for requiring the use of the naming convention. Also a reminder that the naming convention can be found in that 00 drawer, and we'll see that in a minute, or on our Doc Express and Appia webpage. So there's no shortage of places to find it. And then down there at the bottom is a clip showing our IM also, where it says it's required for use. So this is that 00 drawer that we're showing you. Once you click in there, or it has drawers within that 00 contract that are current instructions, current there, or you can look at previous season's instructions. So reminder that the naming conventions do need to be followed according to what letting you are in. So an older letting, you'll need to use the older naming convention. And the reason for that is just we make updates to drawers and stuff that won't reflect in your older one if it is an older project. So that's where you can find those. Here's inside those drawers. This happens to be the current one. Naming convention up above, and then the user's guide is circled there. And there's also the contract signing instructions in this 00 drawer also. So one of the naming convention changes we've had a little while back was payroll. I won't read the details of that for you. The slides, again, will be provided. But I do want to mention that if a subcontractor is added, and the payroll drawer is where we put subcontractors that are added, so that's why it's on this slide, then you need to notify Tammy Bell so she can add them to the list in Doc Express in that payroll drawer, and you need to notify contracts also according to that flow chart in IM 6.000 attachment C. So for contract signing, the fastest contract we've signed is in about 8 hours. Almost all of our contracts are signed in less than 30 days. If it does take more than 30 days, you'll get a friendly reminder from either ourselves or contracts saying, hey, you need to be signing this. IM 5.030 covers the need to sign the contracts digitally through Doc Express. Reminder, this went into effect about a year ago, that the LPAs, or sorry, the Board of Supervisors or City Councils can designate someone to sign on their behalf. It has to be a full-time employee of the respective agency, or if you're a small city, it can be a mayor or clerk if you don't have someone that's full-time. No consultants can be used to sign the contract, and then those designations for signature authority have to be made on a project-specific basis by resolution. And we do have a sample resolution that's linked there in attachment C. So if your agency does choose to use that designation of a signature and you want to upload that resolution, you need to put it in the agreements and resolutions drawer. Please do not put it in the contract drawer or attach it to the contract. Again, that invalidates that contract and we have to delete everything and start all over with the signing. So again, agreements and resolutions drawer for that resolution. Also, just a reminder that if you have any issues getting those contracts signed in Doc Express, please, or any other issues with Doc Express for that matter, please contact local systems or contracts, the Contracts Bureau, with any issues or need for technical assistance. Rather than contacting Infotech, we have some restrictions with the Iowa process and rules in place that Infotech doesn't necessarily know about to guide you on your path. So please contact us first. And as a reminder, never ever contact the contractor before the Contracts Bureau has concurred in that award of the project or of the contract. So if you have a project in Doc Express that you want to clean up and get rid of because it's all closed out and done, you can send a request to your local systems field tech and just make sure you do all your uploads and downloads of that information, whatever you want, before you send that request to get the file locked. Locked files are not gone, but they're hidden from your active list. You can find them by going to that little red, or the little lock button circled in red there. I just don't think you can do your downloads and uploads and stuff from those locked projects. So any questions at this point about Doc Express? We'll get into Appia next. How are archived projects viewed by the LPA? If you just go to that little lock, like turn on that, click on the lock symbol so it's yellow, it will show you all of your locked contracts and you can still view them all. You just can't like do the downloads and uploads. Is there a sample resolution we should use to have the county engineer sign contracts? There is. It is, I believe, attachment C of IM 5.030. And so if you just go to our IMs, you should be able to find that. Cities can use that as well. They just need to amend that language a little bit to reflect cities and city councils rather than boards of supervisors. Okay, so for your contact for Doc Express is Tammy Bell, our e-construction administrator. Right now, Tammy is out on leave, and our hearts and prayers are with her. She experienced the very tragic loss of her daughter recently, and so she's out for a little while. In her absence, I am filling in and doing the Doc Express duties. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll say if you have Doc Express questions, go ahead and direct those to me, or you can send them to Tammy in her out of office. We'll remind you to send them my way. We wish the best for Tammy as she kind of gets through that situation, and she'll be back. But for now, just contact me with questions. We have a question: what if the contractor is not getting info completed for bonds and contract? That's a really good question. If the contractor is not keeping moving, go ahead and contact either local systems or Contracts Bureau, and that would be Mary Thompson in contracts. She will reach out to the contractor or the bonding agency, wherever the issue is. Okay, we'll go on to Appya Updates. So again, revised web page is linked there. Appya is in use by about a third of the counties and a handful of cities, and I think I've added probably 4 more activated 4 more Appya accounts here within the last couple of weeks, so we're definitely gaining on that. The required for use date, and this is extremely tentative in pencil with an eraser, is roughly August of 2021 for counties, and about 6 months later in February 22 for cities. Part of the reason for that is we're still working through some issues in automating payments, and the other part of the reason is I will be on leave starting in roughly early to mid-April, likely. Until roughly June or July, we'll see, maternity leave. So we're not going to implement while I'm gone and can't assist everyone. So we're looking at, kind of midsummer. Please do contact me rather than Infotech for any technical questions on Appia. Again, we have processes in Iowa that they're not really aware of, and so I'm the better contact for that. And if it's something truly technical that I just cannot figure out, we'll definitely contact them to help. While I am on leave, Zach Gunsully is going to be the backup for me, so you can contact him with technical questions. So a reminder, if you don't have access to an Infotech product, so Doc Express or Appia yet, you need to let Tammy Bell know, and she'll get you set up, or me just for the next few weeks probably. Both are accessed from that same login, Infotech login. If you have Doc Express but you want to set up an Appia account, again, depending on the timing, contact Tammy or myself. We can get you in contact with Infotech and get your account activated. Once it's active, you get to add whoever you want as far as users to your account, and those steps are shown here. And again, these slides will be available so you can look at that. There also are instructions. We'll get to those in a minute. So sharing, or more accurately, non-sharing between Doc Express and Appia. Reminder that you can create all sorts of documents in Appia and reports, change orders, weekly reports, payment vouchers, daily diaries, item reports, lots of stuff. But there's no way to directly send it from Appia right to Doc Express. You need to download the information from Appia and then upload it into Doc Express. Although you can add a link that takes you to the drawer in Doc Express, it's just the document still doesn't transfer without you downloading and uploading. So local systems access. For any projects that are DOT let and DOT funded, we are requiring that you give us access, and us being myself and Tammy Bell, and then your regional field engineer. So if you're in this Western region, Zach, and field technician, so Jeff or whoever is hired to replace Julia. So local system staff always needs read-only access. We don't need to be able to write to your files. We just need to be able to see them. So setup details. One of the important things I want you to know is that liquidated damages in Appia, we need you to enter them as 00, so $0, 0 cents, if you are setting up the project yourself. This is because the DOT requires a change order to assess liquidated damages to a project, whereas Appia, if you leave a value in there, if you go over on days, Appia will automatically calculate damages and take it off the bottom line with a pay voucher. So we don't want it to do that. We do instead include the liquidated damages in the description, as kind of shown in that bottom picture down there. So you have the information, it's just not calculating on it. We do need the account ID to be included for each project. We'll have you remove lump sum flags, and I'll give you instructions on all of this stuff when I send you setup files. So project setup files, when you do need them, we refer to them as our easy button files. We're mostly using those. We're no longer using the CSVs that took 45 days. Some of you might remember those. These easy button files are available within days of the letting, and you can just request those from me whenever you need them. If you have projects that are let before April, please let me know so that I can get those to you before I go on leave. That'll leave you not waiting around for projects. If they're let after April, I'll be checking intermittently for those requests to get those to people, just not on a constant basis. So helpful resources that we have. There's several YouTube videos that are actually very helpful and pretty short. There are resources on our local systems site. They're shown in yellow, in that yellow box. Our newest resource is the project creation and account management instructions. That is a step-by-step picture click of every click I could think that you need to make going through setting up a project or manipulating your account settings. Coming soon, I'm really hoping within the next couple of weeks, are those same step-by-step type of picture instructions for under construction is what we refer to it as. So construction phase. So generating or recording daily reports, time limit reports, and charges, item postings, change orders, vouchers, that type of thing. About halfway through those, getting those done. So I hope to find time to keep working on them. So for payment vouchers, we are really striving toward trying to make payment vouchers automated. So the DOT has a new financial system called Workday. And what we are trying to do is once you approve a change order in Appia, or sorry, change order and payment voucher, it applies both actually, that they would be submitted directly to Workday for payment or processing. So we have submitted several test payments successfully through that system or that method. However, there's an issue on multi-project contracts that have both local and farm-to-market components, that the retainage is being calculated differently between the DOT Workday system and Appia. So working through those with finance. Also negative vouchers, we're still just kind of working through issues with those. The new financial system Workday that I mentioned was supposed to go live on April 1st. It's now May 1st, and we wouldn't be surprised if it gets pushed to June 1st. So we're kind of dependent on finance being able to get through all that go live stuff before we can really, really make progress on those automated payments. But we are continuing to work on it. So in the meantime, the question is, well, can I use Appia vouchers still? And yes, you can. We'll allow you to use the PDF vouchers from Appia in place of farm to market or 309 vouchers if and only if you have made a request to me before you advance that project to construction and I've given you the okay. Excuse me. I need to be able to check your project settings and make sure everything is correct in Appia before you get to where you can't reverse anything. And you'll use that detailed payment report to submit when you, as the voucher report. There's several different choices. So reminder, just let me know to review your setup and give you the okay if you do want to use those. And this I'll be clear, applies to just vouchers that replace those farm to market or 309 vouchers. This does not apply to projects where a reimbursement request is necessary, like most city projects or county projects that are off the farm to market system. So final vouchers. Appia requires in their final voucher that you do a balancing change order, and the DOT doesn't yet do those balancing change orders. We're working with finance to potentially allow that process, but right now that's not part of what we do. So when you get to the time that you need to do a final voucher in Appia, we ask that you just do like a normal one, like all the other ones you have been doing, and just release the retainage on it and ignore Appia's final. And then once the final retainage and everything has been paid by finance, then you can go back in and do Appia's final voucher. And all that does is allows you to complete the project in Appia and move it to an archived or completed status. So the moral of the story with the final vouchers really is just contact me when you get to that stage and I'll help walk you through it. And ideally, when I get those instructions done, I'll have instructions for all of that in there too. So this is just the way a sample voucher looks if you haven't seen one in Appia. Kind of front pages there, and then the end of it shows time limits. This one happened to have 3 site times, and a breakout for stockpiles, and then a summary block, which is really, really useful and I like, as opposed to how the 309 vouchers don't really tell you your totals. So a reminder, a lot of you got this right in the poll question that Zach did. Where do I send my vouchers for projects on the farm to market system? So again, this is 309 or farm to market vouchers, not reimbursement projects. So for all vouchers except the final, send those to dot.localsystems, that email address for processing. Local systems staff is now processing those rather than finance. Do upload them to DocExpress as well, but make sure you send us that email. We don't necessarily know when they're ready for processing just because they're in DocExpress. So this pertains to whether you're using the Appia voucher or the true farm to market voucher. And final vouchers, continue just to complete those and upload those as normal to DocExpress, and the local systems staff will submit the final packet to finance for closeout. So using Appia for item postings or quantity entries, remember that it's very, very important to enter all measurements, test results, location information, and any other pertinent information to how a quantity was arrived at in the remarks or location fields within the item posting in Appia, and I'll show you an example in just a minute. We can generate a report at the end that is item by item that captures all entries for each item on each day, and our local systems staff will want that to review and or audit your project at the end. Remember that you can add any type of attachment, whether it be videos, drawings, CAD files, Excel files, whatever you want. You can add those as attachments to a daily report. So here's the screen for item postings. We've got a quantity placed, and these green boxes are going to show you, look, I had test results for concrete. So enter those in the remarks. Location information, anything you can put there that's helpful. Station information, that needs to be filled out. All of this information is stuff that you would always put in your field books or quantity sheets. So we still need that to be able to document and audit a project. So recent challenges faced with Appia. The easy button file, I'm having to adjust a lot of things before I send it to you. We are working with Infotech to get those adjustments made so that we don't have to spend so much time manually doing that. And eventually, when we have the easy button files all ironed out, we'll just be putting them in DocExpress for you to grab rather than you having to request them from me, but we're not quite there yet. So another challenge is just providing all the up-to-date reference data for locals. There are currently a few bid items, like a new safety closure item, that are not up to date. So when I send you the setup file, I'll give you instructions on how to update those for yourself or create those new items. Again, I talked about calculating retainage and that difference for multi-component contracts and being processed through Workday. Just working through logistics of auditing and records retention. We think we've got most of that figured out with knowing how to run some of these reports, but has been a challenge. The desire to customize reports and data entry fields, we're still working on that. One of those is for change orders. I'm really pushing to have some custom fields put in there so we can mimic the DOT forms better. Right now, you need to just remember to put in every piece of information that's on a DOT form. Automating payments has been a challenge, and then lump sum items have been a little bit of a challenge. CPS, or contractor pay, requires you to put in dollar amounts instead of portions of the lump sum, and so getting that to agree has been, yeah, a bit challenging, but we think we've got that kind of worked through at the moment. The last things would be funding caps and funding source prioritization. So right now, Appia doesn't recognize if there's a cap to a certain source of funding, like if you had $1 million cap on STBG money, and then it needed to go to a different source for source number 2 once that cap is reached. They are working on that also. That might take a little bit, but progress is being made. So whoops, go back one. So Appia time limit reports. I know a lot of people were kind of dismayed at maybe the lack of detail available in these, but I'm very happy to say that coming very, very soon, like it might even be today, I can't remember exactly what their email said, but we will have the ability to enter, and you will need to enter the controlling item. Is the contractor working, yes or no? What's the reason for the delay? And the report will now show the % of contract complete. So all of those things will help make the Appia time limit reports very similar to our DOT standard reports. And Infotech is working on fixing the glitch that shows the wrong total days to date instead of the date of the end of the report. Field manager, for those very few counties out there still using it, we were saying you could opt in or out by project. We have changed that to you have to now decide to be either all in or all out. So once you opt out of field manager, you're out for good. That just needed to happen. It was too much of a management nightmare to be in and out. Also a reminder to everyone, whether you use field manager or not, when you activate a project in TPMS development, or go check your current ones you have there, in the setup tab, make sure that that field manager yes or no designation is correct there. If you do use field manager and want to opt out, you must inform Christy and Joe during project development. Upcoming trainings. So we have some trainings for Appia at this point in person next week on March 17th and 18th, and then one on March 31st over in Monticello. I say subject to change just because of kind of personal restrictions with dealing with the pregnancy right now, but at this point we are planning to do it in person. You can register for those through IDOTU, and there was a GovDelivery email sent out to our local systems general listing on March 3rd. So we also now have, thank you Nicole, information on the trainings up on our local systems website, so you can see them there also. So with that, are there any questions about Appia? Just a reminder, if you need account access, generally contact Tammy Bell. If you need any type of technical assistance with project creation, implementation, closing it out, just using Appia, go ahead and contact me first. And if I'm on leave, Zach will be the backup for that. So if there are no questions, I'll turn it back over to Nicole.
Our next presenter is Sarah Okerlund, our urban engineer, and she's going to talk about inactive obligations and project end dates and why those are important for your projects.
All right, can you guys
see? Yep.
Perfect. All right. So hello, everyone. I am Sarah Okerlund. I'm the urban engineer for anyone who maybe hasn't met me. And today, like Nicole said, I'm going to talk about inactive obligations and project end dates. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but I'll try to go through things quickly. So federal fund management. Iowa DOT's IM 1.200 includes guidelines and procedures for local public agencies and Iowa DOT staff to comply with the various federal requirements that are associated with the federal funds. So this entire presentation will only apply to projects with federal aid on them. This IM includes 6 key items, but today we're really just going to focus on the inactive obligations and project end dates. As a reminder, for anyone who's maybe new to the DOT or to the state of Iowa, Local Systems has developed and maintains what we call instructional memorandums, or IMs, for various transportation topics. To find those IMs, you can simply go to our Local Systems website. I would just Google Iowa DOT Local Systems and it'll take you right there. Select the instructional memorandum and federal aid guide there on the left. And then from there, there's 2 options, really. The first would be to go ahead and go into the search bar and type in whatever topic it is that maybe you're looking for. If it was project end dates, you'd go ahead and type it in there and it'll give you some options. And the second way you could view it is to go to the table of contents. And by going here, it'll pull up a PDF that has live links to the different IMs that we have available for everyone. As noted, here's a clip of IM 1.200, as well as attachment A, which includes procedures for Contracts Bureau to estimate our project end dates. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I also wanted to note that the instructions here, or the introduction here within this IM, it states that the intent is to provide guidance and procedures to help ensure compliance of both Iowa DOT and our local agencies with those federal requirements. So to put that in perspective, the DOT received over $480 million in federal obligation authority and $525 million in appropriatements in federal fiscal year 2020. So these funds are really important to the state of Iowa, and we don't want to jeopardize those by doing or not doing anything it is that we need to do. So what exactly is an inactive obligation? Well, first, an obligation is usually what it means for a project when funds are dedicated to a certain thing for the project. It could be design, right-of-way, construction. For construction projects here at the DOT, projects are authorized by Federal Highway roughly 1 month prior to letting, so that's when the authorization would happen, and it would become obligated. A project becomes inactive or when there is no billing or reimbursement on that project within 12 months since the obligation. So by looking at a construction project, if you have a construction project that is let, 11 months after it's let, if no activity has happened on it as far as a billing, it will become inactive. So why does this matter? Ultimately, it's one of the metrics Federal Highway uses to measure successful federal fund management practices. To remain in compliance with federal regulations, Iowa DOT's inactive obligation total has to remain under 2% of all our total obligations. So this includes our local agency projects, our primary district projects, railroad projects, and research projects, among others. Those are the main categories, though. And at one point in 2020, the DOT was actually put on notice by Federal Highway that if we were not able to get under our 2% target for a quarter, funds would be unilaterally deobligated, meaning the federal government would take away projects of their choosing the funding on them to push us below that 2% target. And to kind of give you all an idea of the role that the local agencies play in that 2% target we're trying to get to, at the end of last quarter, over a fifth of all the inactive obligations were related to local agency projects. And roughly 30% of the 1,100 open federal aid projects across the state were actually local agency projects, either led through local systems or through systems planning. So really the best way to prevent a project from becoming inactive is simply to make a payment. So I'd suggest making a habit of requesting reimbursement roughly every 6 months on a project. Go ahead and put it on your calendar so that it reminds you if that's what's needed. it's not a normal practice for you. Another way to reduce inactive obligations is to adjust the obligation to line up with current cost estimates. This is actually required when the adjustment would make a $250,000 or more difference in the price. Say you have like a significant portion of a project that's removed, maybe a full leg of an intersection is removed because of a development project or something, then it's required. Otherwise, it's voluntary, but it would help you with the inactive status. And I apologize. So another way to prevent issues is to complete a timely project closeout. We're finding that many of our inactive projects are actually related on both the local side and our state side to just delayed project closeouts. So, and how do you know if a project is in the risk of becoming inactive? The DOT reviews those on a quarterly basis. So your regional field engineer, or ZAC, will reach out whenever a project appears on that quarterly list. What we ask of you guys is, if you receive that notice, please respond in a timely manner and include all of your like the requested information that is needed. Then ZAC will have that information to relay onto Federal Highway. And if you're a consultant working for a local agency, if you could pass that information along as quickly as possible. A lot of times for our cities and counties, their boards and councils have to approve these types of payments. And so it can take a little while to get on agendas and get through the process so that a reimbursement can actually be requested. So if you could help us out with that, that would really be appreciated. And as a reminder, a lack of a response or a delay in project closeout may result in deobligation of all of the remaining federal funds. Next, I want to talk a little bit about project end dates, or our PEDs. What are they? They're essentially a date that's required to be established by federal regulations for all federal aid projects. So as we mentioned, the Iowa DOT estimates these project end dates according to our attachment A to IM 1.200. So each project will only have a single project end date. So if you begin your federal aid project with a consultant design, that authorization is going to get a project end date. Then say you let that project and it becomes an active construction project, the DOT will actually assign an updated project end date during the letting process to reflect the construction phase of the project. Something else to be aware of is that project end dates also get set closeout timing requirements. So this has become increasingly important to the Federal Highway, and thus it's important to us. Over the past year, clarifications and updates to the Code of Federal Regulations, sometimes referred to as CFR, have actually caused a higher focus on these. I'm not going to go into all of the project closeout stuff during this presentation, but I want you to be aware that the timely closeouts are super important, especially for these federal aid projects. And I expect probably further updates to our IM, but currently it says that your project closeout, everything should be submitted within 45 days beyond that project end date. And that's really kind of your drop dead date. Beyond that, it's out of compliance. So how are the project end dates established? As mentioned, we follow this attachment A, and it includes various categories of projects that are kind of listed here. There were updates to this IM and this attachment in June of last year. And in case you're familiar with the old version, the changes are actually noted there in the purple text. The two most impactful to all of you is probably the addition of an extra year for construction and construction engineering and other non-construction work. And then we also had a shift from a June 30th project end date to a September 30th project end date. And the main purpose of that is so that that 45 days beyond that project end date that you need to have all of your materials submitted then doesn't fall in the height of our construction season. So hopefully that will help a lot of us out throughout the process. And one of the biggest things I'd like to point out is also that attachment A is intended to be an estimate and a place to start. So please run through this exercise yourself to determine what that project end date will be estimated at. And if you don't think it provides enough time for your project, especially if it's a complex project with lots of phasing, Make a request during your final closeout or your final plan submittal. Add it to the cover letter, what you expect to need and why. Go ahead and state the project end date of your request, and we should be able to make that happen. And the same would go if you're working on a project and you would like to request a special late start date or early start date. That would be the time to submit that information as well. So now you're probably wondering, how do I know what my project end date is? And so assuming your project is active in DocExpress, the document you would want to use would be called a FEMIS document. FEMIS is Federal Financial Management Information System. Yet another acronym because we don't use enough. But these FEMIS documents can be found in the Agreements and Resolution drawer. If your federal aid project does not have a FEMIS document, please reach out to your regional field staff. So either reach out to Zach or Jeff and bring it to their attention so we can get one added in there for you. It's something we've been adding for the recently let projects, but there was a period of time in there that we're missing. So we're trying to kind of backpedal and get those filled in. So if you can just be patient and bear with us and let us know when we need to, and we'll get it in there. If your project predates DocExpress, reach out to your field staff and we'll get you a copy of that. So we've got a few different versions of this FEMIS document out there. This is an example of an older one where the project end date isn't its own category on it. So instead, what you're going to have to do is look down in the remarks category area, and it will give you that project end date down there. Here's an example of a newer FEMIS document where they actually have the project end date there. And then this is yet another example of a FEMIS form that you might see uploaded, and its project end date can be found there. So please monitor the project end dates for your active federal aid projects and share the information with your contractors so they're aware of it as well. You can definitely just add this to your pre-con agenda, and that's a nice quick way to mention it. Our regional field staff may reach out and request updates if a project end date is less than 6 months out. Again, please respond to these as quickly as possible and with written responses with the support information listed there and within the IM. If necessary, this is a good time to request a project end date extension. So what warrants a project end date extension? We've got a lot of information on this slide, and it's also, it's right out of the IM. So project end date extensions can be requested basically for anything that is beyond the control of our local agency. Examples would be change orders, unforeseen utility conflicts, or unusually severe weather, say a flood where things are inundated and underwater for a long time. If projects are delayed, you do not need to wait until the end of the project or that project end date is coming up to request an extension. It can be requested at any time. Nor are you unable to make a project end date extension request if you are less than that 8 weeks out. Our IM is set up to give you enough time so that if you say roughly 2 months before your project end date, you're able to request the information, we should be able to go back and forth with Federal Highway and answer any questions they might have before that determination is made. If you're closer than the 8 weeks, it's possible you might have a period of time where your project end date happens and you don't have an extension yet. That would become an ineligibility, an ineligible period. So any work that happens between that project end date and when your request for an extension is officially approved would be non-participating. So just something to remember and a reason to ask for those extensions early. And a couple other June 2020 updates that include that a project end date can be extended more than one time. I think previous guidance was that only a single time, so people would wait until the end. That's no longer necessary. And when you have multiple divisions of a project, so you have some non-participating and some participating divisions, that project end date really needs to reflect all work, not just participating. Since it's tied to the project closeout, the only way to close out a project is for all work to be complete. So make sure you leave room for that when you're actually making your project end date extension request. And so here's kind of a little bit of information on how the IM will follow you through on how you actually make that formal extension request. It does need to be in writing. email is perfectly fine, and you will work through your administrative bureau or your regional field engineer for that process. So here's my contact information. If you just have general federal funding questions or inactives or project end date questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you have a project specific question, I would request you reach out to your regional field staff. They'll be able to better answer those questions. But are there any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat pod. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Any questions for Sarah? You're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask. Okay, well, we will get started with our last speaker of the day. Clayton Burke is from Construction and Materials Bureau, and he's going to be talking about work zone safety and some various new initiatives that are out there.
Good morning, everybody. If you're not familiar with me, like Nicole said, I'm Clayton Burke. I'm the traffic work zone, traffic and safety engineer in construction and materials. I took over from Mark Bortle at the end of 2018, and it's been going great. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I get to work with pretty much all the construction contracts across the state, and I get to focus on making sure that those work zones are safer for the drivers and those of us working in them. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Decorah in the northeast corner of Iowa, and then I went to Iowa State, graduated, and while I was going to Iowa State, I interned in the Jefferson construction office. So I got some experience, some hands-on experience with construction projects, like we were doing a 7-mile section of US 20 by Webster City. So that was one of the first big projects I got to work on. I really enjoyed the work and the people that I got to work with. So I stayed on, worked in the materials lab while I was taking classes, and then I would go back out into the field in the summer. When I graduated, I got a job full-time in Marshalltown, in the Marshalltown construction office as a transportation engineer intern, and got to do more construction. Then we moved to Grimes kind of for family reasons, and I worked in the Grimes construction office for a year until this opportunity came up. So really enjoyed working in the field, and every person I've met in the field has always been great, and I really enjoy kind of the different personalities that are out there. I do have a quick presentation here I'll share. So I do have a few topics. First, I want to talk about Work Zone Council and what it is and why you should care about it. And then I'll go into some of the October specification updates and an important one that will be active in April. Then we do have a new device called a Smart Arrow Board, and that's now required on our interstates. If you're not familiar with what those are, I'll talk a little bit about those. We are doing extra enforcement requests a little bit differently. So if you ever need an officer and want to look at how the DOT does it, I'll tell you where those documents can be found. We're doing work zone reviews differently this year as well, trying to get better data. And then I'll go over some different improvements we found this year and kind of what it'll look like in the future. Finally, I'm very involved with the new interstate pavement markings that we're working on. So I'll talk a little bit about those and what you can expect to see in the future. And then I do have a couple slides on work zone safety awards at the end. So first, Work Zone Council. This was an initiative that started last year. And what it is a group of representatives from all the different bureaus and offices and local systems that represents, basically the idea is to represent everyone that's impacted by work zone decisions. In the past, the decisions have been made by kind of a small group, a select few specialists and experts on the subject, which makes sense. They go through all the research every year and they know what's going on. But there have been a few cases where some decisions have been made and not everybody liked them, and maybe the impact to certain offices wasn't considered. So we want to make sure that everyone is involved with work zones and the future of our work zones. So to do that, we now have this council. It meets quarterly, and it's basically an open forum. We do ask for different topics before the meetings, and really we're focusing on getting information from the field. So if you're interested in more information on this council, we do have our work zone reference library public webpage. And the fastest way I found to get here is to Google Iowa DOT work zone reference library, or WRL. And it should be one of the first links that comes up, and you'll see this page when you open it. On the left side, you've got the Work Zone Council tab, and when you open that, you can look at the members or the articles of incorporation, which talk about why we're doing this. But an important document at the bottom talks about innovations in our work zones. And that's a big focus of the group. I like to tell everybody, kind of like Dan Sprengler and Willie Sorensen, if you know them, I'm a specialist on our specifications and the different research that's going on related to work zones. But you guys are really more specialists in field implementation and how those changes or our standards and specifications actually work outside of the contract, how they're actually working in the field. So what we really want to get is more feedback from the field and hear about maybe you've noticed a better way to do something, and you need some resources to make that change. The Work Zone Council would be the place to get those resources you need to make your idea happen. So I'll show you, this is the organization chart for the council. I don't expect you to read all the little words. I just wanted to show you how many different groups are plugged into this. And focusing on the field, we have the industry represented by what's called the risk group, or Roadway Industry Safety Committee. So we get a lot of input from contractors and, excuse me.
Clayton, it looks like you got muted.
Yeah, I hit the mute button. And
Okay.
Sub-screen disappeared on me. So we're getting a lot of input from contractors, and then an important input for the field side is the districts. But we also have local systems represented by Donna. So if you ever have any ideas, make sure they make their way up to Donna or whoever continues to represent local systems in the meeting that is coming up. These are the meeting dates for this year. We just had our January meeting, but the April meeting is coming up pretty quickly. We do want to have any agenda topics in 2 weeks before the meeting so that everyone has time to read about and prepare for the different discussion topics. So just keep that in mind if you're submitting one of your ideas. Specification updates. There was a fairly large traffic control related update in October. It went through section 2528, which is our traffic control section, 2518, which is the safety closures, and 1107, which is our general safety and public safety specification. I'm not going to go through all the different changes, but if you do have a project that is using Iowa DOT standards with 2528, just check it out. Look for the gray highlighted language. Kind of the general purpose of the changes was to remove some of the outdated language and some contradicting clauses between 2528 and 1107. And then we wanted to address contractor access to our interstate projects. Our specs didn't really allow for any good way for the contractors to get their employees to most of our interstate projects, and they weren't being followed. So we put some better ways for the contractors to park their private vehicles safely within our project limits, and then related to storage of material as well. We also merged 2518, the safety closure specification, into 2528. We thought safety closures are essentially just another works of device, so we don't really need a separate specification where you'd have to go look up when it could be conveniently located with the rest of the devices. In April, you'll see a change to 2528 related to trained traffic control technicians. I think this was by far the #1 topic I got phone calls on last year. And there's a lot of different interpretations of what this clause meant in 2528 in the traffic quality control section. So we do, for a long time, we've required the prime contractor to maintain a trained traffic control technician on staff. And the intent was that that traffic control technician would manage their quality control program. They would have some training, understand work zones and work zone devices, even if that contractor was not a traffic control contractor. So they would be able to bid projects appropriately and make sure that they have all the appropriate devices and follow our standards. In 2018, we added this section to require a trained traffic control technician to be present while devices were installed or removed. And there was some couple different conflicts this year. Some contractors were interpreting the word supervise differently. Some were thinking that just meant that the supervisor of the employees installing the devices needed to be the trained traffic control technician. They didn't actually need to be present while the work was being accomplished. And what we really want is for that technician to be out there in the field in reasonable charge of the work, supervising it and directing it. Because we have had situations where a contractor will throw new employees out that have never installed any traffic control before, and they send them out there with the standard sheet and they say, go set this up and take it down. And we've had some bad results from that. We want to make sure that there's a minimum of one person out there that knows what they're doing. They've had training, and they're going to set those lane closures or whatever the traffic control is. They're going to set it up correctly. So this change in the language that you see here in the highlighted sections is intended to, particularly, I added the words be on site. So it's clear it's not the person in the office signing the paychecks. They need somebody to be present while the traffic control devices are installed and removed. Another point of confusion is who signs the daily traffic control diaries. I've been relating this to different types of projects. So first, if you can imagine a patching project where the contractor sets up a lane closure and tears it down pretty much every day, that trained traffic control technician will need to be present every single day of that project, or at least every day that they set up the lane closure and tear it down. And you'll see that trained traffic control technician has to sign the daily traffic control diary every day of the project. For a larger construction project, maybe that has several stages, maybe you have a traffic shift where the contractor comes in, sets up the traffic control either the first day or the first week, and then they don't come back until that first stage is completed. The trained traffic control technician is needed for that first day or the first week that the devices are installed. And then between that time and when they take the devices down, any contractor employee can drive through the site, observe the devices, correct any devices that need to be corrected, and then sign the diary. So that is a situation where you do not need a trained traffic control technician present every day, and they would not need to sign the daily traffic control diary every day. One of the contractor's employees has to sign it, but like I said, it doesn't have to be a technician. And then one small change you see here at the top, I added the language devices located within the traveled way or median. And that was to address a contractor concern that they were having to send employees, like an hour and a half away just to set up roadwork ahead and end roadwork signs and then come back. And it would typically be on a smaller contract, like you have a clearing and grubbing contractor doing work off of the traveled way, and they just need those roadwork ahead and end of roadwork signs, but they don't maintain a trained traffic control technician to set them up because they don't do that type of work that often. So we felt that that was not really a good use of our resources, the contractor's resources. That prime contractor they can set that device up without needing that advanced traffic control training. So we've made it so that any device on the outside shoulder, typically signs, but maybe as complicated as a shoulder closure, can be set up without the supervision or without a trained traffic control technician being on site. And if you still have any more questions on this, I'm always happy to get phone calls or emails from anybody. And I love hearing from the field. We can talk projects and hear how everything's going out there. Our arrow boards, like I said, this is something new on the interstate this year. And if you're not familiar with them, they're going to look pretty much exactly the same as the arrow boards you're used to, but they'll have this little black box on the back. And that little black box is a lot like a cell phone. Every time the contractor stands the board up and turns it on, it'll send a signal to the DOT's system that tells us the GPS coordinates for that board, the fact that the board is on and which way the board is facing and which way the arrows are pointing. So we can take that information that the board sends us and we have an exact date and time that it was turned on, and we know which lane that the arrow board was closing as long as it's not a 6-lane facility. Why we want that is because Iowa is currently a national leader in work zone data. We've been doing a lot of work with Iowa State, and we have sensors all across our roadway systems that give us traffic volume information, traffic speed, and then we also have a crash database that we can reference to our work zones to compare and see how many crashes happened in a certain area. But the piece that we're missing is actually knowing where and when our work zones were. So this device is one of the first steps we're taking to get more accurate location and time information that pertains to our work zones. As a result from that, we should be able to make better decisions on lane closure times, things like that. What type of traffic control should we use? Because we'll be able to get better data and see exactly how that lane closure or that contraflow traffic control impacted traffic, and not only at the work zone, but also upstream and downstream of the work zone. So I think we're going to get a lot of good information out of this, and hopefully this will relieve our construction offices from having to put all projects into the 511 system if it can automatically tell the traffic management center when and where our work zones are. This is the section of 2528 that now requires the smart arrow board on any interstate projects. The intent is to expand this to the entire primary system in a couple of years, but we wanted to, it's going to take a while for the contractors to get all the equipment and be ready for that. So now we're just starting on interstates where we're going to get the most value out of the information that these boards send us. And this is 4188. This is just the specification, and this is all the technical information for the boards, what they have to do. And this is probably something you don't really need to know about if you do happen to have a project that uses state specifications and impacts the interstate. But what you do need to know is the materials approved product list for smart arrow boards. As long as the contractor has one of these boards on our list, that's it. That's all they need to have. You just document that they have one of these, and that should be it. The board works automatically with our system. They don't have to do anything or tell us anything. Just as soon as it gets turned on, that board will pop up on a map that we have, and we can see that it's active. Work zone extra enforcement. Excuse me. This is something that's very well documented component of work zone safety. Those red and blue lights do a great job of getting people's attention and getting them to at least look up while they're going through the work zone. It also has a pretty big impact on traffic speeds and gets everybody to go a more consistent speed. You know, they don't always go the speed limit, but at least they get down to 5 over, something like that. And they all go the same speed through our work zones. Typically, so there's a new process that the DOT is using to request extra enforcement officers that we developed with the motor vehicle enforcement. So we're asking everybody to call their area motor vehicle captain to schedule any extra enforcement that they need. Those captains, when you call them, tell them when and where you need them, and they'll either be able to fill the shift with their own forces, or they know the Iowa State Patrol very well and they know all the contacts there. And they've agreed that it'd be easier for them to contact Iowa State Patrol and fill that shift for us rather than us going directly trying to shift between different agencies and figure out who has the staff to do this. So now it's one call, and that request should be filled, and then you'll get a call back from that motor vehicle enforcement captain letting you know that it is filled, and this is who will be out there at the time that you requested it. If you're looking for more information, there will be a new guide that we're putting out that explains the process of requesting extra enforcement and has all of the area captains' contact information and the areas that they cover. It's not out yet, but I think in about a month, you'll see it on that same work zone reference library that has the information on the work zone council. Work zone process review. This is something that Mark Bortle and a big group used to do. They'd get together in a van and drive around different districts in our state and basically just try to find as many work zones as they could. When they went through a work zone, they had a review sheet with a bunch of different items that they would check off, and they would rate the sign reflectivity, the devices, cleanliness, and the device spacing. And then all those sheets would come back to Ames with them, and they would use that information to help guide some of the different training they do, like the winter training seminars and maybe the district construction conferences. But this year, nobody could get in a van together, so I had to drive across the state with a camera, basically a dash cam, and I filmed all the work zones myself, and now we're reviewing those work zones through Teams meetings, just like this. We'll get together, watch the video, and the nice thing about the video is if we miss something, we can always rewind it and look at it again. But we fill out that same review sheet for each project. One thing that's different about the review is that we're now doing it online through, if you're familiar with Survey 123, it's something that Iowa DOT maintenance uses a lot to keep track of, like their inventory, their signs, and their culverts. But it allows us to fill these reviews out digitally, and then it goes into a database. And having that data makes it really easy for us to look at statewide averages. So we can break it down to county or district and look at. So Maybe we have a sign reflectivity issue in this side of the state or in this district, and we could work with that district on checking their sign reflectivity a little more often. But I'd also like to use it to look at things we're doing really well, and also tell people that they're doing a good job. You guys had awesome flaggers in your county, and your flaggers were put in the right spot. They knew what they were doing, and they effectively transfer traffic to the work zones. So I don't always want it to be a negative thing. I also want it to be, let people know that they're doing good work most of the time. You'll see a list like this as something that might come out of it, like I was just saying, and this is something we came up with this year just based on some of the observations and phone calls I got. The first item is 55-mile-an-hour sign covers. So if you have any projects that are impacting, you have a lane closure on a route that has a speed greater than 55 miles an hour, we're seeing the sign covers fall off more than they should. And that's a big problem because you'll have some drivers that see that first 55-mile-an-hour sign, and they will go that speed through the entire work zone, regardless if they see that sign that the cover fell off of that says 60 to 70 miles an hour. And then you'll have other drivers that maybe they slow down initially, but then they see that sign where the cover fell off, and they think, or they take advantage of it and say, oh, now I can go 70 or 75 again. Then you end up with a 20-mile-an-hour speed differential between that first person and the other person. And we all know speed differential is not a good thing in our work zones. So the sign covers are important, and the contractors should be using whatever device they use to cover those. It should stand up to a reasonable amount of wind in Iowa. Obviously, they can't design it for 120-mile-an-hour winds, but an average Iowa windstorm, those covers should be staying on. Temporary barrier rail. Now, this is something I wish I had more information on when I was in the construction offices. It gets used very differently depending on what you are. And I put just a couple bullet points of things that I've done wrong in the past, and it really probably should be done this way. The first one is we should have a minimum of 100 foot or 8 sections of TBR on each side of the hazard that you're protecting. And that 100 feet should not be protecting anything. I like to relate it to high tension cable guardrail. They have that big concrete lug on each side, and that's what they use to tension the cables off of. That 100 feet of TBR provides the weight that keeps the middle section from sliding further than it's designed to slide, and it keeps that hazard protected. There's also the issue of using unanchored sections with anchored sections of TBR. If you go from an unanchored run to an anchored run, if they hit the TBR right before the anchored section, those unanchored pieces can slide and hinge around the anchored section and then pinch the vehicle between two pieces. It can also create a blunt end that's not protected when the unanchored pieces slide too far. And then it can also create a catch point that kicks vehicles out into traffic. So what we should really see is if you anchor any section of the TBR, you should anchor all of the TBR. At least all of the TBR upstream in the direction of traffic. You can go from anchored to unanchored because you won't have those problems that I mentioned. But you really shouldn't see any TBR installed that goes unanchored section of traffic. We are working on a standard that gives you a transition section if you're using the big stakes to pin the TBR. You go the unanchored section, and then you have a section that only has half of the holes pinned, and then you have the completely anchored section. But it's not official or approved yet, so that might be something you see in the future. Traffic shifts. We had a lot of projects, particularly on the interstate, where we shifted traffic all the way to the edge of the pavement, and then we had either a granular or earth shoulder. What we saw were semis that would, they'd often off track onto the granular earth shoulder, and they would create a rut. And then eventually, when the rut got deep enough, the semis would get pulled off of the road onto the foreslope, and they'd either slide into the ditch or the median. So how we're trying to combat that is make sure that we have a minimum of 2 feet of pavement adjacent to the traffic shift. That gives semis a little more room if they don't quite stay within the lines. And then that pavement can be pavement, or it could be a paved shoulder if you need to stick a small shoulder widening block onto your project just to make sure that they have that. High volume merges, again, another issue on the interstate, but we had a few projects where a very high volume entrance ramp, a high volume of interstate traffic merging, and noticing traffic doesn't really like to make room for that ramp traffic coming in. They don't slow down and make space in front of them, and they don't move over. So that ramp traffic often has to stop at the end of the ramp when we shorten it up. We did have several projects where we were doing staged ramp construction, and we had a barrier all the way to the tip of the ramp, and then there was no route of escape on the shoulder. We were seeing some pretty high rear end crash rates on those projects because the driver has to stop at the end of the ramp, and then the next driver is likely looking over their shoulder and not paying attention to what the driver in front of them is doing. So we want to always try to make sure we're providing a route of escape on the shoulder whenever we're working on ramps. And if we can't, we do have some advanced messaging we can use to help encourage drivers to make space for traffic that's entering. Some advanced messaging and some intelligent work zone devices that we can use. Pavement marking removal. I saw a lot of partially removed markings after projects were completed. Particularly around Ames in our area, but I think I see it across the state. And it makes sense to me. The pavement markings contractor is usually the first one in and the last one out of a large construction project. And at the end of the project, a lot of times they're under the prime contractor's thumb to get done and get off the road and get it open so they don't get any liquidated damages. So they might be rushing and see the quality of the marking removal go down. We really want to see that 95% removal because most traffic on our system can navigate our roads, and they'll see those partially removed markings and understand they're not really supposed to be there, and they'll follow the new markings. But in certain situations like low angle sunlight during the morning and evening rush hours, or in a rain event, sometimes those partially removed markings will actually stick out better than the new markings because they have a little bit of that texture from when they were removing parts of the marking, and they just stick out better than the consistent, smooth, new permanent markings. And that can cause an issue with our drivers, particularly drivers that maybe can't see as well as others. So we want to make sure we're working with our contractors and make sure they know we care, and we're going to be looking for the more completely removed pavement markings at the end of our projects. So interstate pavement markings, if you haven't heard about this, it's something we've been working on for a while, but we're just starting to finally put these markings on some of our new projects. You'll see this is a project that was just completed this year on I-235 on the southeast corner. You can see the contractor has finished the ramp lines and the edge lines and the center lines on this side. But what I like about this picture is you can see you've got the edge lines over here completed, but then the center line still has the tape that's been there for 4 or 5 years. And you can see just how much brighter and more reflective these new lines are. What we changed was we went from a 4-inch line to a 6-inch line for everything except for our channelizing lines, which are now 12 inches. We also added this black contrast line as a tail to our typical broken center lines. And then we are grooving the markings and using what we call a multi-component material, or epoxy is a form of multi-component material, which is more durable than the waterborne markings that we use now. We're expecting to get hopefully 5 years out of these markings before anyone has to go back out there. And that's a big safety improvement for our work zone crew, or for our paint crews, because we're seeing on the interstate, that's where we're seeing a lot of these hits on our crews. And if they don't have to be out there, we're seeing a big benefit from that. Work Zone Safety Awards. This is something new we started last year too. And initially it was advertised just for the primary system, but we did get some nominations for a couple county projects this year. So we thought maybe we should expand it to different local systems as well, because there's a lot of great work zone work and effort that goes into our local system projects as well as our primary system projects. So keep an eye out. You might see some more information on that for this year, because we are thinking about creating a category that is just for local system projects. And again, you can find that information on our Work Zone Reference Library page. Right here's the Work Zone Council tab, and then just below it is the Awards tab. And you'll find the letter that Wes Musgrove from Construction and Materials sends out every year, and then also the application and the winners from last year. So with that, does anybody have any questions on work zones or anything in general? All right. Thank you, everybody.